Hey YouTube, we're outside today for a little bit of a change. I've been spending way too many hours in front of the monitor lately. I'm finishing up some retouching from the last shoot, so took the show outside today to get some fresh air, nice weather, so welcome to my backyard. Today I want to talk about making a plan on what RF lenses to buy. Should you get EF, should you get RF, which ones should you get? I tried something different this week that gave me some confidence on what path I should take, and I want to share that with you because you could easily spend $10,000 to try and get the most creative work out of your lenses, and maybe you don't need to. So just a heads up, this is not a tech review of each lens to tell you which one is the best. It's more looking at price for creative output, and this is my path. Your needs might be completely different, but if you use this tool, I think you can still find your own path. So to kind of start at the beginning of this story, when I bought the R6, I was not planning on buying any RF lenses, at least not for a very long time, because they kind of sold this camera on being really good with adapted lenses. So I was thinking I'm just going to go pick up the old EF stuff on budget, on sale. But that works on paper, but in reality, as we've seen, this is just really not the case. The old lenses can't keep up with the new speedy autofocus. But they did gain some nice things like the in-body stabilization and some focus peaking abilities, so it wasn't a complete loss. You just have to use them for what they're best at. So at this point, it's clear to me that I need a new path. This EF plan is not going to work. I need to get into RF lenses. And when I first got into photography, I was overwhelmed by the number of lens choices and all of the abbreviations that come with them, like IS, VC, DC, DS. You've heard them all, macro. And then to make it even worse, every third party has their own verbiage to make it even more difficult. I still don't quite understand why it's so difficult to make a choice. There's over 80 EF lenses ranging from 8mm to 1200. And on top of that, some lenses are sharper than others, yet there's no industry standard to tell you which one is better. You just have to rely on reviews and going on YouTube and just, cultural knowledge being shared. And why is every f1.2 lens 3 to 4 times more expensive than any variable zoom? The last time I checked, glass was pretty cheap. So we're either paying for the research and development behind it or some artificial paywall designed to just make them more money. Whatever the reason, we're stuck with this and we're going to have to do our homework to make intelligent decisions because this can be an expensive hobby. So I struggled for a long time since I started shooting to kind of understand what lenses I needed to have the maximum creative output, but save as much money as possible because I'm an enthusiast shooter who kind of dabbles in the professional sphere. I don't want to invest $10,000, at least not up front to get started. I want to kind of build my way up into that. My current EF setup allows me to do that, but I always felt a little bit lacking in it in a couple areas. Like I didn't have enough zoom, I didn't have enough distance focal length, my aperture was never low enough. So I want to solve this problem for the R6, and maybe I can help you out too. So back to the opening comment, what gave me peace of mind, what did I do, and how did I do it? So the first thing is to look at all of your options. I took a look at every RF lens out there and I put it into a database so I could see what I'm working with. Now, step number one when you're overwhelmed is take a step back and get a different perspective on things, or a wider perspective. Then in a column on the right, I identified what kind of group these lenses were in. Is this the Holy Trinity? Is this the budget option? Is this the medium option? Is it a kit lens? Things like that. What are the outliers? Which lenses are mostly just geared for wildlife and sports or portraits? Then we have things like extenders and kit lenses, which, there's nothing wrong with a kit lens, but it limits your creative options and it should be identified as a different category. It's not great in low light and you can't do fancy bokeh things. So I did this project in Airtable. And to be honest, normally people go to Excel, but Excel is very boring. And Airtable can be kind of fun to look at, kind of fun to work with. It's basically cells and rows and columns in a database format that can then be transformed using these conditional tables. And I'll show you what I mean. So next I sorted this database by looking at each group and what that kit would cost. What's nice about Airtable is that it totals it for you based on whatever grouping you have going on, considering that you've made the column a currency column. So here you can see the ideal kit is going to cost you like $11,000. This gets you most of the zoom range from 28 to 500. Next is the budget group. You can see every lens is under 2K, and it gets you a nice mix of zooms and primes that can give you some low light abilities, but also some versatility. The issue I've always found with this budget area is there's too much crossover. You could buy one zoom that kind of cancels out 3 prime lenses if you don't really need that low aperture. So I always felt like I was kind of wasting money in this area. So by doing this process, I revealed what I saw was actually a mid-range where you don't have to spend 10, but not quite 3,000, and it still gets you some interesting gear. For about 8,000, you can get from 15mm to 200 and still has some nice versatility and low light, but there's still a little bit of crossover. This is sort of like a semi-pro level because 8K for this kit is still like a good used car. So a lot of people might be hesitant to go jump this far, this quick. And then you can see we have our niche categories down below and what those cost, which I'm not going to get too much into because I'm an enthusiast shooter. Don't do wildlife, I don't do too much sports and things like that. So the last step here is I added a column called price path, where I could identify what I needed out of this whole group, looking at the different tiers and packages and usages, and I came up with something that kind of covers my needs, and it looks like I'm sitting at about 8K, which is not the pro ideal gear at 11, but not quite 3 budget where I'm at and kind of left unsatisfied. I feel like this is a good happy medium, and it actually picks lenses from each category. So to break down my reasoning for these choices, let's start with the top. The 35mm RF. This is my nice walk-around lens. It's light, it's easy on the shoulder. As you can see in my previous video, it's really great at portraits, it can handle low light, it has macro. It's just kind of like a do everything everyday kind of lens. Something you want to have on it all the time, and great for travel too. So next up is the 24-70. This is where the versatility comes in. If I need to be making quick decisions, switch from portraits to landscapes, usually at a wedding or event type thing, this is where the zoom comes into play. And I go with the 2.8 as opposed to like the 24-105 f4 because I've owned the 24-105 and I find just the low light and the lack of creative bokeh just always left me lacking a little bit. At this price point though, I'm not going to run out and buy this right away. This is something I'm going to save up for. This is not like a dump investment. For me, this is a long-term hobby. I'm going to buy this down the road when the time is right, or if I get a lot of weddings lined up. But the most important thing is I know where my money is going to go, and I know the path I'm going to take, and be confident that I'm not going to have too much crossover. Lastly is the 85 1.2. I don't actually want this lens. I would prefer a 100mm or a 135 f2 in that area. It's just that the RF lineup doesn't have one yet. I'm sure they're going to, but when that time comes, that'll be my portrait lens. That'll be for dedicated, highly creative, super bokeh, smoothie background kind of stuff. And I'll know I have that covered off. And it'll give me that really nice compression at that kind of focal distance. And I don't need that right away because as I've shown, the 35mm 1.8 is actually doing a pretty good job at portraits right now. And I can always rent these if I need it in a pinch. So the last question people might be having is, what about the 70 to 200? What about those long distance ranges? So I came up with an interesting plan. I still have my Canon 6D. So if I'm shooting a wedding, I'm gonna bring that along as a backup camera. And I'll always have a lens on it, it'll be ready to shoot. So I'm planning to buy an EF Tamron 70 to 200 f2.8, which is half the price of the RF version. And I'm only gonna use it in these special circumstances anyway, and I can adapt it and just see how it works. But I feel like it's a good trade-off that can give me good usage out of my old equipment, keep me covered, and possibly even serve for both bodies. So that's all I got for now. I hope this helped you guys out a little bit. I'm gonna share this Airtable link so you can kind of see what I've done up close if it was kind of hard to see in this video, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks. If you enjoyed this and learned something, please hit like and subscribe. Visit DemaninPhotography.com or my Instagram for even more info. Bye for now.